Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel Houseplanty Goodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it around me. I talk about tropical houseplants. Now today's video is going to be slightly different. Usually I would focus a bit more on an individual plant and tell you my experience with it and what I do for its care. But today I thought I would actually go into a bit more detail about buying plants online. I've got a very good thriving community of followers on Instagram, and if you're not already following me on Instagram, do consider giving me a follow. If you check the description down below, you'll find my Instagram profile. But actually a few followers on there were asking me questions about what my experiences have been with ordering plants online or ordering plants from overseas online. Now I can talk a bit more substantially about ordering plants online within the same country that you're in. I haven't actually, surprisingly enough, for the sheer volume of tropical plants that I've got in my collection, I haven't actually ever personally ordered plants online from abroad. But I can talk a bit on it based on experiences that I have heard from a lot of my planty friends. But let's start off with buying plants online within the nation that you're in. So I'm currently based in the UK, in Europe, so I can talk a bit more about what it's like here, but I would imagine a lot of this would apply to wherever you are at the moment. So in the UK, when you're ordering plants, there's a few things that you need to consider. So weather being the predominant one, because UK weather, unpredictable. But the one thing that I would say, and I have ordered plants online throughout the year, so I've seen what it's like all throughout the year, all throughout the different seasons. If you can, one of the things that I would say is try to avoid buying any plant online, if possible, during the really, really cold, frosty winter months, basically. And in the UK, that could be a very long few months, depending on how brutal the winter is that we're having. There are options where some of the really good plant stores online will offer you, if you pay an extra £2 or £3, that you can actually buy a heat pack to go in with your plants so it doesn't get as much of a shock in the cold weather. Not everybody, however, will do this. And for instance, I'm thinking now maybe some eBay auction purchases, because it's coming from an individual, they might not have the luxury of being able to offer you a heat pack. However, those plants are still available year-round online. If you're dealing with a good eBay seller, they might actually have some communication backwards and forwards with you and try to hold back your plant by a few days, especially if really cold weather is predicted. Sometimes you can't get away with doing that in the really, really cold months where you've got cold days consecutively, because otherwise you'd be waiting for weeks or months to get your plant. But that is something to consider. And it's more specific about the plant that you are purchasing and how it might be able to handle that kind of shock of the cold. Now, the reality is most tropical houseplants, and the clue's in the name, they are tropical plants, would probably not do very well for a prolonged period of time in a cold box whilst going from all the different shipping depots. However, there are some plants that might do a bit better, and this would apply to buying plants internationally as well. So some of the plants that I've got chunkier stems, so more mature specimens rather than really, really juvenile plants, plants that have got an established root system that maybe have quite succulent roots or quite succulent leaves. All of those plants would do a lot better when traveling in the colder months without a heat pack. Now, that's not to say that some of the slightly more sensitive plants might not do as well, but those would be the kind of plants that you would really either want to wait until the slightly warmer months or see if you can purchase them from a plant store that does offer shipping with a heat pack. Majority of plant stores, at least in the UK, they will make you pay for the heat pack, but and this is something that you need to consider as well, look at the price of the plant that you're purchasing. If it's a rare plant, if it's a common plant, it doesn't really matter. If it's a plant that's got a substantial value to it one way or another to you, whether or not it's a monetary value or a sentimental value, is paying that extra £3 or £4, in the UK at least, for something like a heat pack going to be a bit too much? That's not the place that you want to be skimping on price, essentially. And the same thing goes, especially during the winter months, of that might be the time that if the plant store that you're buying online offers different shipping options, that would be the time to spend a tiny bit more and go for the fastest delivery option possible. If they've got an overnight delivery, so a one-day delivery, do that. Be careful as well and maybe reach out to some of the plant stores if you are ordering in, say, if you're ordering something on a Friday. So maybe kind of reach out to them and say, can you please maybe not send it on a Saturday? Even if you've got next day delivery, that will still be stuck in probably unheated depots overnight, over the weekend, and it probably will only arrive to you on Monday anyway. That's still going to cause the plant some stress. See if you can kind of practice some patience and reach out to the plant store, see if they're comfortable. Most of them should probably be open to this and say, look, would you mind, instead of sending it on the Saturday, send it on the Monday, so then you'll get it on the Tuesday. You have to wait for a bit longer for your plant, but the likelihood that there's going to be less stress on the plant is much higher, basically. So that's something that you would want to do. Now, the other thing that I do want to touch, and this again applies to both international and domestic shipping of plants, is you are shipping a live thing, basically. You're shipping a plant. And I've heard stories, and I'm friendly with some plant stores and growers, both locally and around the world, and this is something that they struggle with a lot of the times. And it's usually people that may be buying plants for the first time online. The slightly more seasoned individuals probably already know this, but it's a plant. And yes, you can judge a store on how well they ship their plants. If this is plant store, and even an eBay seller as well, people like that, if they're used to shipping plants all the time out to people, their packaging is probably going to be quite good. Again, you need to decide for your own benefit whether or not you want to go for packaging that you might be able to recycle versus packaging that you might not be able to recycle. There are pros and cons for both, believe it or not. But it is something that you need to remember when you are buying anything online and it's coming to you in a box and it's going via couriers, via postal services, via all of these things. Even with the most secure packaging that a plant store, an eBay seller, anybody would put together, there is still always going to be a chance that there is going to be some damage, usually cosmetic, to the plant. And that could be a snapped leaf, a wrinkled leaf, a slightly yellowed leaf, especially if it's coming in from abroad, or even if it's coming through on cold days in the winter without a heat pack. Those are the things that, being a bit blunt, you just need to kind of get over it. That plant is, there's always going to be a risk that that isn't going to come to you pristine. And guess what? The only way you're going to get a pristine plant is by physically going into the plant store and picking it up yourself and babying it all the way back home. And let's be real, if you're driving anywhere and you're putting it somewhere like in the boot of a car, or even if you're in a big city and you're going on the metro or the underground, there's still a chance that that plant might get bashed, might get squeezed, all of these things, and you might still have damage regardless. So that is something that you just need to be aware of. That plant will not look as pristine if it's coming through the post than if it did if you went to pick it up from the plant store, which basically means, and I think this is probably what most people would have an issue with, it's not going to be Instagrammable potentially for the first couple of days or weeks until you kind of manage what you need to do there. And again, I will advise for caution before removing a cosmetically damaged leaf, especially if it's a relatively young plant and it doesn't have as many leaves, in the sake of it being a prettier plant to look at for a bit. And the reason for this, and I've mentioned this on a couple of other videos, if you've got a plant that, say, has 3 leaves on it, and one of them is slightly bashed, but it's still perfectly capable of photosynthesizing, and you remove that, you've essentially got rid of a third of the potential of that plant to photosynthesize and grow, which generally would mean, especially in the winter months when most plants are either not growing at all or growing very slowly, you've hindered it even more in terms of growth speed. So you've taken away a third of the potential that it had to photosynthesize and grow. new leaf or grow larger generally. So just bear that in mind. But yeah, essentially the big takeaway from a very long rant that I just had now is you're probably not going to get a perfect plant. Go in with that assumption that there's going to be some damage. It doesn't matter how good the packaging is, and the plant stores and most sellers on eBay, generally most people that are selling plants online and through the postal service, they will do their best to get you a plant in as good of a condition as possible. But if you go in with the assumption that there's probably going to be a tiny bit of cosmetic damage because postal service, and it doesn't, then great, you've kind of come off better. But if it does, then you're not massively disappointed. I think that's, just be realistic on your kind of expectations coming in from a plant store. Then obviously you've got the rehabbing of the plant, bring it into your condition. It's been out in the cold, especially if it's coming in the winter months, or even in the summer as well. It's been in a box for a day or two potentially, so it's not been getting any light. Put it in a good position where you'd want to have it in your house. It might still throw a bit of a wobbly and a bit of a hissy fit until it gets used to your environment, because your environment, regardless, even if you were going to pick it up in person through a store, would be different from where that plant has been living, essentially. And this is never truer as well with some of the plants that travel a lot to get to you, especially some of the mass market plants, a lot of the more common plants that might, before you've got that in your care, it might have traveled, especially if you're in the UK, it might have traveled from the Netherlands to a distribution center. From that distribution center, it probably would have gone to your plant store. At that plant store, it probably stayed for a day or two to acclimate, or maybe none at all. And then it went into another postal package to come to you. So the plant's been through probably quite a bit of stress before it's even arrived to you. So just baby it slightly for the first week or two. Just kind of monitor it, see how it's doing, and adjust your care accordingly. I'm not going to go too much into that because this video would become quite long, and I'm already looking at my camera and it is already longer than I would have liked it to be. But yeah, so that's a bit more about the domestic. If you want to know a bit more, if you want me to do a separate video and go into more depth on ordering online domestically, let me know in the comments down below, and I can always bring out another video on that topic as well. Now, international, as I said, I'm going to just touch on it briefly. So a lot of the things that I've just said now about the domestic would still apply for the international. So just be aware when you're ordering in the winter months. A lot of the other things that will happen with some of the growers, because a lot of the times it might be growers that you're buying it from directly from the Far East, so maybe Indonesia, Malaysia, all of these different places, is they will usually offer something like a heat pack. Now, you need to remember as well, most heat packs are only viable for like 72 hours. And a lot of the times, because the shipping can be quite high from those countries coming into your country, you kind of get into that notion that I need to add more to the order. Now, some things, and that can get quite expensive, even if the individual plants are cheaper than you might get them locally. Few things that people have done over here, and I think a lot of people do, is they go into a cooperative purchase. So if you've got a couple of planty friends and you all live locally to each other, maybe you all come together digitally or in person and just say, okay, what do you want to buy? What do you want to buy? And put it in one order, get one delivery coming in, and then you just all need to go and pick your plants when they arrive and take them to your own respective locations. But that helps to cut down the shipping, because essentially you're all going into that purchase and to that shipping cost together. The other thing to remember is things like phytosanitary documentation, and some of the international growers will offer this as standard and it will be included in the price. Others won't, and you need to pay extra for it. It's up to you whether or not you want to pay it, but generally speaking, legally you should, because there is a high risk that if you don't pay for the phytosanitary certification and it comes into the country that you're in, it might get stopped at customs, and if it doesn't have phytosanitary certification, customs will not allow it to come in and it will destroy the plant. And then you're in a situation where you need to talk to the growers where you've purchased it from and see if they will give you a refund. However, they might turn around and say, well, no, we told you on our website that this is there and you could have purchased it. We will not honor a refund because you took that risk knowingly. So do know that a lot of the times, if you're not getting a phytosanitary certification, again, because you probably want to save some money because it can be quite expensive. I'm thinking 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds or dollars at a time. So again, it's better to do a larger order and get a couple of friends in, because then that cost spreads more evenly. That is something that you do need to bear in mind, because what will generally happen at customs is they will actually destroy the plants. They will never arrive to you and they will destroy the plants. And it's a shame, not for any other reason, that those plants couldn't continue living because they had to get destroyed at customs. So that's something to remember. The other thing to remember is when international shipping companies or international growers are shipping plants abroad, a lot of the times they will come bare root, and that means they won't have any soil or any sphagnum moss necessarily around them. It will probably be a bit more of a sterile media. Some of the Asian countries might wrap it in wet tissue paper, so that's something to bear in mind. There's usually, in order for them to get the certification and in order for them to make sure that everything is hygienic before it kind of moves out, they do, and this is something I only recently found out, they do usually treat the roots with quite harsh chemicals to kind of get rid of anything. So those roots are already stressed and the plants are already stressed. Again, it's a case where it might be worth splurging a bit more, and that's why I'm saying maybe try the cooperative approach, splurging a bit more and going for the fastest delivery option that you have. A lot of the times it probably won't be a day or two, it might be a bit longer than that, but the point I'm trying to make is for you potentially saving $10 or $20 on a $200 or $300 or £400 or dollar order to not get the faster delivery, which means that you'll get your plant in 7 to 10 days. That's 7 or 10 days that it's sitting in a box, possibly in the cold and with no light before it even arrives to you. And keep in mind, again, it's got no soil. And even if it does have that wet tissue paper around its roots, there's only so much that that can do in that situation. And also there's more chance that it's going to get bashed around and you're going to have more cosmetic damage. I am making this sound particularly stressful, and there's a lot of things that are happening, but it is the case a lot of the times with international orders of plants. It's an even bigger gamble than it would be if you were buying something online domestically, because you've probably paid a lot more, you've paid more for delivery, you've paid for the phytosanitary certification, you have to wait for longer, you've probably got more plants coming together just in order for you to kind of make it all worth that price. So a lot of these things are things that you need to consider. The other thing to consider is when things arrive, and I'm going to be a bit brutal with this one, even if everything comes to you and there's lost its leaves, as long as you've got a healthy stem, and if you're really lucky, some healthy roots that have survived all of this, and there are certain plants that will ship better than others, and I'm not going to go into the more specifics of this. Kaylee Ellen here on YouTube does talk about which plants ship better than others. Go and check out some of her videos. And you just need to remember that there is a high likelihood that you might lose all of the leaves, you might lose all of the roots. As long as the stem is okay and you can propagate from it, then great. Assume that what you are paying for when you're buying some of these plants from the international, and I'm going to be really quite harsh here, assume that you're buying an unrooted chunk. So no roots and no leaves, and then you need to propagate it from there. And if they arrive and they've got good roots and good leaves, that's a bonus, but it's not a guarantee in most cases. So as long as you've got a healthy stem, you should be able to then propagate it. And at the end of the day, usually the reason why you've bought it online from an international seller is because it's so much cheaper than it would be at home. So that's something that you need to weigh the pros and cons, essentially. But yes, I think I've already gone on for way too long for this video. Again, as always, if you've got any questions, comments, if you want me to do slightly longer video on both of these topics, do let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.